everybody, and welcome to this brand new spoiler review for The Bad Batch, Episode 10, Season 2, here from the
Geek
Buddies.
Hey! We're back at it again to break down another episode of Season 2 of The Bad Batch as we're turning the corner as The Bad Batch is about to wrap up in a few weeks. But, of course, The Mandalorian right on the horizon, waiting to come on in and take our Star Wars attention as well. Season 3. Brand new poster dropped today. I don't know if you guys saw it. They've turned the Mandalorian and Grogu into the Virgin Mary and Jesus. It's insane, the picture. We got to calm down, y'all. We got to calm down. But I am so excited to jump into what we got here in The Bad Batch. An interesting show for sure. Interesting episode for sure. More about symbolism than it is about the actual actions in the show. We're going to break it all down here on this episode. Let's introduce ourselves. I am the Outlaw John Rocha, writer, producer, and host here on the Geek Buddies. Is Michael frozen?
Oh, I think he's frozen. Oh. I was like, look at him smiling all nice.
Son of a bitch, we were doing so well. Damn it. That was a good intro too. Shit.
It was.
We have to edit that whole thing now. Well, anyway, how are you, Laura?
I'm doing great, John. I'm great. I had a hell of a commute today, so it's been a day. Oh, really? But now he's gone. All right. But yeah, he's back. He's back.
I'm back, guys. I don't know what happened. That was crazy. It's been a weird day. There's blizzards in Los Angeles. Things are wild. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, it's supposedly hailing in Irvine. So anyway, let's make it so it's easier for me to cut. Can you just go, yeah, and this is Michael, so just go from there.
And this is Michael Vogel. I'm a writer and producer of animated TV shows and movies.
And joining us, the co-host of Force Toast Pod, the co-host of The Jedi Way, someone who is knee-deep into reading all about the High Republic right now and is excited to join us here. Or we're excited to have her join us here on the show here. Laura Kelly, how are you, Laura?
I'm good. I'm also excited, for the record. So this is perfect. And yeah, High Republic, I'm caught up. I'm actually ahead of everybody, which is really exciting. And now I'm on to Jedi, the Fallen Order book, the Battle Scars. So I'm not quite through it yet. I'm only a couple chapters in, but liking it so far. That one I think is coming out first. So I got to catch up.
You know, I tried to read Battle Scars. Laura's like, oh, no. You got to read this, this, and this. Then you can read this. And I was like, all right.
Oh, no, the High Republic. Yeah. I was like, you can't just jump in.
Jedi. Right.
Yeah. You got to read Battle Jedi. You got to read Convergence. Can't just jump into Cataclysm. Although if you do that, Cataclysm's totally worth it. It hits so hard.
Wow.
Shit.
When do the rest of us get to read Cataclysm? When does it come out?
Like April 4th. It's like forever away. I don't know. I wish they hadn't sent it out yet, because as soon as I got it, I was like, oh, I'm going to read this now. And now I have nobody to talk to about it. And it's awful.
That's the peril of getting stuff ahead of time sometimes. But yeah, we're going to get into this episode. Oh, no, wait. We should also give love to Carbon Health, who continues to power and sponsor us here on the Geek Buddies, and all the work we do, all the reviews, all the regular shows, everything we do here on the Geek Buddies. Head on over to carbonhealth.com. Get yourself checked out today. Maybe you're an Ipsum miner. You got little scars on you. You got a little wear and tear on your body, a little burn notice going on there. Head on over to carbonhealth.com and get it checked out today, either virtually or in person, or download the app to have a doc in your POC. 80 plus locations in California, 100 plus locations all over the country to take care of you. And they're focusing on mental health stuff as well. So if that's something you're going through, go and check them out and see if they've got services that fit your needs at this stage in your life. All right, let's jump into this episode here. It's called Retrieval. When last we left the Bad Batch, this is where we're picking up. So Michael, your overall thoughts on this episode as we dive into the story of the Bad Batch getting out of the situation that they're in, meeting the thief that stole their ship, finding out that he's in a kind of an Oliver situation there, and breaking them out and them heading off at the end here with their ship. What are your thoughts overall on this episode?
It is perfectly fine. It is a perfectly fine episode. There's nothing wrong with it. Nothing great about it. It's perfectly fine. I just really crave, and I guess this is just, I was really trying to think of, I watched this episode and I'm like, Bad Batch looks beautiful. This was fun. Loved sort of Oliver in space. Like, it all worked. It was all perfectly good. And I was like, what is it that's bumping? Because it's not like every episode needs to be this earth-shattering, change the face of Star Wars episode. Right. So what is it that bothers me about Bad Batch? And I think what it is that for a show called The Bad Batch didn't do a lot. Like, they're cool. they invaded the thing, and I get that Omega is really our focal point, and I'm all about Omega being sort of the driver of the show.
Yeah.
But, Tech and Wrecker and Hunter were there, but they were very supporting. They were just sort of in the background. Like, Omega went with Benni to sort of explore everything.
Yeah.
Omega's the one that figured out that they could track Gonki. Omega's the one that realized that Mokko was lying about the Ipsum. And meanwhile, like, Hunter and Wrecker and Tech were just sort of like fixing the ship. And then they kind of came in and I feel like Hunter and Wrecker and Tech in this episode had about as much screen time and importance to the plot as Rex or Cody did in a Clone Wars episode, which is fine, except that a Clone Wars episode is focusing on Obi-Wan and Anakin and Ahsoka and the main characters. And so I just feel like the Bad Batch continues to take a back seat in the Bad Batch.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a valid points that you're making, Michael. It feels like, when the lead singer of a band starts to become more famous than the band, it should be called Omega and the Bad Batch now, kind of like you saw with other Gloria Estefan and the Miami Sound Machine. Yeah,
it should be called Omega and the
Oh,
Bad Batch. Omega.
there you go. Jesus. Laura Kelly, your thoughts overall on episode 10 here, Retrieval?
I really enjoyed episode 10, Retrieval. The alternate title of this episode could be a commentary on capitalism and corporate greed, and I very much enjoyed that. Now, I understand the irony of the Walt Disney Company being the one that puts this episode out to us. I get it. Yeah. The message still hits, and it's still important, and it still works. So overall, I really enjoyed the episode. I kind of, didn't hate that the Benni character was sort of giving a little bit of young Ezra Bridger. I thought that kind of worked for the story. And Wrecker's serving up a lot of laughs in this one. He's not on screen a ton. He doesn't have a ton to do, but when he is there, he's making it work. And I appreciate that.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought it was a perfectly fine episode if you look at it from the symbolic point of view of what they're going for here, because we had a little bit of that in the last episode too, this exploration of how we do things, how someone, just because they don't show emotion doesn't mean necessarily they don't feel the emotion of a situation. Omega navigating that. Well, here's something new. And look, we've been feeling that throughout this season, that Omega slowly starting to take the lead. Even Hunter took a bit of a backseat on a mission that he's the one that was creating and making happen here, even though Omega's the one that found Gonki. It was Hunter with the plans and everything, but it was Omega, who, as you pointed out, Michael, who's doing these things with Benni, who's going and challenging Mokko and leading to Mokko just flinging himself over the side of the railing there at the end. So all of that leads through all the way back to Omega, and even Omega having that interaction with Tech right at the end, kind of connecting to the previous episode where they came to terms about each other. Tech essentially replacing Echo now for Omega, so they can have these little end of the episode back and forths that further them pushing the Bad Batch towards being a part of the Empire. Yeah,
I think that's what it is. I think you just nailed it when I was thinking about the last week versus this week. Omega being the lead of this show, and this story ultimately being about how Omega's journey with Clone Force 99 turns her into whatever it is that she's going to become. 100% on board with that story. The difference between this week and last week is Omega's feelings and Omega's opinions and Omega's actions forced Tech to step outside of who he was and expand himself as a character. And it was great. I love that.
Yeah.
Omega here went on an adventure, and the Bad Batch saved her at the end and picked her up. Now, if this had really been, and I mean, I don't want to write the episode for them, and they're much better than I am in a lot of ways, but had Hunter had a really hard time letting Omega go off with Benni, had Hunter really had when Omega forces them to grow as well while she is still the focal point on her journey, I like it a lot more. And when she doesn't, it's just kind of the A-team in space, and it's super fun and it looks amazing and it's good, but it doesn't get me super excited.
Okay. Well, let's deal with the character of Benni. Full disclosure, that's my friend Yuri Lowenthal. We used to co-host a couple of shows together way back in the past, and I texted him immediately as I was watching the episode yesterday, and got a nice sweet text from him back, and I'm going to his birthday party. So there we go. But it was so great to hear his voice, and I just popped up as I was making my notes. Oh, I know that voice. So an interesting character, Laura. You say Ezra Bridger, you see the Oliver connections, as I said earlier, but certainly representing this person that is born into a situation situation, and because another person comes along who's older, more mature, or maybe more experienced, takes advantage and promotes a narrative that that person needs them to survive and only gives them just a little bit, we see piece by piece how he slowly puts it all together, where he at first was quite happy with the crumbs off the table until he realized how much food was actually on the table. And when he did, he was the one that was essentially leading a mini revolution on that walkway there that led to Mokko's death. So what did you think about the character of Benni in this, as a new character here in Star Wars in this episode?
I liked this character a lot, and I know we got our sort of first impression right away of setting the scene of who he is. I mean, we get him landing back on wherever region of this planet that this mine is on, and as soon as he goes to disembark from the ship and he sees like a piece of food on like a ration bar on the floor, I mean, he's like diving at it and greedily eating it. So we already now have set the sort of scene of like how this kid is being treated in the environment that he's been raised in. And just watching his sort of his actions and reactions in this, like, Stockholm syndrome is a hell of a drug, because this kid is like in it. He wants to be in Mokko's circle, and he's hell-bent on doing whatever he can to get there, even if that means stealing the ship from these poor strangers. But I really enjoyed some of the, like, sort of, there were some like kind of Andor parallels I feel like we can kind of see in here, where we are making all of these kids sort of compete against each other to sort of distract from the fact that there's really a higher power kind of at play here that is acting as the oppressor. And the distraction's working really, really well. I mean, this like absolutely like devastating scene where Drake, not Benni, is the one who gets top earner, and his prize is a bowl of soup that kind of looks like a bowl of diarrhea. It's really not appetizing looking at all. And then the rest of like what these like other 15 kids have to share one bowl between. I'm just like, it was just devastating. So they did a really good job, I think, of sort of setting the scene here. And I thought that Benni was a sort of great protagonist to kind of lead us through it.
Yeah, Mike, he seemed to be, he's a good thief. He said it's a skill when you're good at it. He didn't feel guilty about it. He was unapologetic about it, not in a angry way, but more like, hey man, this is what I do. This is what I had to do to survive, what I had to do to live. And because of this society, but he's also bought into this idea that if I can just impress this guy enough, I'll get into his inner circle. I'll get into this. And certainly, Mike, we know those organizations that feed off a one person giving just a little bit, but keeping a lot for themselves and deluding people into believing that they need to work even harder so they can one day achieve this thing, which is, of course, a complete and utter illusion. And eventually you're going to be caught, or you're going to be moved out, and someone else is going to take your spot. So what did you think about how they created this character of Benni and moved him through the episode all the way to the end, where he takes, in essence, control, and they turn this place into either a socialist or communist place? What do you think of that?
Yeah, I thought he was a great character. I thought he was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed him a lot. And much like Laura, I saw a lot of the Andor vibes. I mean, I saw a lot of the prison arc of Andor in this. I mean, the prison arc of Andor was all about, if you are the table that gets the highest score, you get, some taste in your food. And if you get the lowest score, you get shocked. And if you are the leader, you're competing with the other leaders. And so by keeping everybody competing with each other, you keep everybody's eye focused away from you. And that's what the Empire did in that situation. And that's what Mokko was doing in this situation. And I think in general, using Benni as sort of the main character to take us through this world to see what it's like living. And I mean, that's kind of where Star Wars does do really well. Like Star Wars, particularly this era of Star Wars, is all about people at the top manipulating the people at the bottom to think that they're powerless. And that's why the whole story of the rebellion is so great, because it's a bunch of people who have been told that they were powerless rising up. So in a way, this episode, as far as Benni and the others, it's just a little mini precursor to the rebellion that we're about to step into.
Yeah, interesting. And I'll swing back to you, Michael, because there was that conversation there between Omega and Tech at the end that leads into what you were just talking about, right? Because he says, or she says, wow, there's a lot of people like I know we're supposed to be mad at the Empire, but there's a lot of Mokkos in the world as well. And Tech counters and says, yes, they are, but there's also a lot of us in the world. So What do you think the message is that they're trying to say? As Laura pointed out, we see this story as essentially a commentary on capitalism and corporate greed, and deluding people into believing the very little bit they get is a lot, and keeping the carrot and the stick, the carrot on the stick, just far enough away for you to never actually catch it. What do you think about the interaction there between the two of them at the end?
Yeah, I mean, it's. I don't think it's any secret. I mean, given what's happening with Echo, given what's happening with all the characters with Sid, like it's really clear where they are going, which is Omega's going to want Clone Force 99 to become heroes. And whether that means joining Rex to help other clones, whether that means being a part of the rebellion, whether that means we're not going to fight the Empire, but we're going to go fight all these other people on the Outer Rim that are taking advantage of what the Empire is doing and trying to like make their own, you know, like, does this them going up against the Hutt cartel? Is it them going up against the Pikes? But there are so many villains and cartels and gangsters and smugglers in the Star Wars universe that try and feed off of the oppressed. And Omega is clearly leaning towards, hey, we could do more. I mean, to borrow a little bit from Last of Us, it's like when Tess says to Joel, save who you can. And I think what Omega is seeing is the Bad Batch could be saving a lot more people than they currently are.
Yeah, Laura, what do you think about this exchange? And what Michael pointed out is really interesting, because you both have been mentioning Andor. Andor, that first season is the slow turning of Andor into, and I don't mean slow in a negative way, the slow turning of Andor into a rebel. And we're kind of seeing that in this second season, that Omega is turning into a little rebel herself, who is going to possibly, as Michael said, lead Clone Force 99 into battle against the Empire, to do battle against the Empire here. Are we seeing the same blueprint played out here in this season, and certainly in this episode, as she becomes more and more aware and more vocal of how the Clone Force 99 needs to kind of play a hand in this fight?
You know, I kind of like this sort of journey that we're going on with Omega, because when you think about how Andor's much more of an adult show, this show, you know, the Bad Batch is obviously aimed at a much younger audience, and Omega she is kind of our Andor character. We're getting to sort of see her have that desire to sort of rise up, and as she's becoming more of an adult and wanting to sort of take on more in the galaxy. And I like that, because we've come a long way with Omega. I mean, the whole first season was all about protecting her and kind of keeping her under wraps as much as we could. And we're going in a much different direction this season, and I really like it. And I really like the potential of where it could lead us in seasons 3 or 4, where we do start getting a little bit more involved with the rebellion, perhaps, if that's the direction they go. And I do hope it is. But this moment at the end, I think, of this episode, where we're sort of bookending this Tech and Omega arc, I thought was really touching. And I was getting a lot of that conversation was sort of giving a lot of Rise of Skywalker, Battle of Exegol, there are more of us, Poe line from Lando, which I really enjoyed. So it was, I like that we seem to be sort of inching a little bit closer to maybe becoming part of a bigger fight. And that's something that I kind of need in the show. I think I've sort of voiced my frustration in some of the storylines where I'm sort of missing a bigger overarching story, bigger stakes. We're still kind of in this little bit of this mission of the week trudge, and it's fine, but I wish there was just a little bit more happening kind of in the big picture, and I'm hoping that we get there eventually.
Fair enough. Let me swing back to you, Laura. Mokko, what do we think about Mokko as one of those villains here in the Star Wars universe? Disposable, only for one episode, was leading this contingent of people, had essentially sort of or kind of saved this town after the miners had left. What did you think about him as a character in Star Wars? Is this so forgettable, or did you actually enjoy the design, the look, the feel, the voiceover work here for this character?
Jonathan Lipau, I thought, did a great job as the voice of Mokko. The voice, I thought, was really great. Character design, I thought, was maybe a little bit more on the forgettable side. To be honest, I couldn't quite figure out when he actually fell off the bridge, like, what happened. Like, did he, because his limbs were still attached. He had like these mechanical, at least one mechanical limb. It seemed like that was still intact. He just kind of lost his grip, I think. I went back and like watched it several times. I'm like, what happened? I don't know. But then I just got stuck on how Benni like still somehow looked sad after he fell, which I'm like, man, it's still, after all of that,
Yeah.
he still looks sad after this guy goes down. But I mean, characters like Mokko, he's just the worst kind of predator. I mean, a guy who comes in and sort of profiteers off of the fall after this war has ended, and the fall of the Techno Union, and just comes in and takes over in just the most vicious way, predatory way, and then somehow is able to continue on that streak and just victimize all of these young kids into working in this mine for scraps. It's disgusting, and it's sad, and it's very much a commentary, I think, on real world elements, unfortunately.
Yeah, Mike, they took some effort with the design. They gave him this kind of interesting cane. They gave him a right hand that has the little whatever spinning razor things, blades on them. And also the gear, the kind of the robes that he was wearing, all of that. They spent some time, and the weird kind of, it wasn't Trandoshan, but there was a weird kind of reptilian vibe to it. What do you think about the whole design in this character here, and the voiceover work here for this character in the show?
I thought for a one-off character that you were gonna just get rid of at the end, they put a lot into him. I think it was a perfectly fine design. I think he was cool looking. I liked him. I do like when I like when they make choices, and this is a fun thing because you don't think about this, but in animation everything is a choice. So to your point, like somebody was like, he lost an arm, he's got a cane, and I'm sure there's reasons. Like there's reasons why he did. Like you're like, it's not just like someone came in and you were like, oh yeah, that looks cool, let's go with that. Like those are all choices they made. I like the choices. My favorite thing about Mokko is how he eats.
Yeah.
Like that's my, like honestly, like for all that was in the show, like that scene of him just chowing down on food like it was going out of style, and then coming out and being like, not a lot of food, here's your diarrhea soup. Like I like just like that really got, like that was it. Like you're like, all right, I get who this guy is.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? I mean, just the whole thing, because he was eating with such speed too. And then he said,
"No, like he was eating like there was a stopwatch somewhere, and he was trying to win a contest. Like, and it was like, and it's all of it. It's the animation of him eating, which is not always the easiest thing to do, combined with like the sounds of masticating, like like it was just all of it to be like, I am disgusted by everything that's happening right now."
It's fascinating because he tells the droid, "I'll come out there when I'm good and ready." So, what was the rush if you were speeding through everything? I don't understand telling them when you're good and ready, but there's probably a huge backstory with Mokko where he was like this abused young part of this whole situation, had his hand cut off or whatever, and was starving through a majority of his life, found his way to this position, and so that's why he eats the way he does, is because he, just like the kid, just like Benni, when he gets the food, he just devours it in such a speed and fashion. So, maybe there was something in the back. If they had left him alive, maybe there was a redemption arc.
Listen, man,
for Mokko
know, in like 2 years, we're gonna get the Mokko limited series on Disney Plus, where he lost his arm because he tried to steal some food from a Rancor or some shit, and we're gonna be like, all right, cool, I guess. I'll take it.
This fall, Claudia Gray, Mokko, the Lost Chronicles. I can see that. I can see that. Let's take a quick break, and we'll jump into a little bit more of Clone Force 99 and what happened here in Retrieval right after this. All right, Michael, swing back to you. I think this is the final thing I have to say about it. You mentioned that you didn't feel the Bad Batch did a lot in this episode, but there was a mission. They did go on. I mean, Tech had the blueprint. They kind of scoped this out. Hunter went in first, disabled the droid, made it possible for them to go in. And yes, of course, then Benni tells them where the ship is. They go and put the ship together. Benni goes off with Omega, and they all come back. But they also like kind of trap Benni and force him to tell the truth. A little bit of an intimidating moment there. I mean, literally takes him off the cycle, the speeder, with his arm there, knocking him to the ground. And then Omega has the arrows pulled there, the energy bow. So what did you feel about how they used them in terms of performing the mission once they got to the factory and subduing Benni and getting him to lead them to the factory to get their ship back?
Clone Force 99 being awesome is great. Like, and they do that really well. Like watching them when they go into action and do their thing, and we've got 60 seconds before the exhaust thing comes again, and Hunter goes down, and he's got to fight the droid. You got to do, like, that's all great, and I think they do a wonderful job with all of that. Mm-hmm. I think though that I think that Dave Filoni early on, when he described the Bad Batch, described this as like just it's the A-Team in space. Like that's what they were going for, and that's what it is.
Yeah.
But I think it's kind of what I was saying before, which is this story. Benni and the children miners
the Jets
have a big arc. Like they're the ones that have the whole like, okay, well, we have changed our opinion of Mokko and we're rising up. Omega has a little bit of, I'm seeing the world in a little bit of a different way, but the clones just come in and do their thing. Like what I wish that you could have done Hunter and Omega, you could have done Hunter and Wrecker, you could have done Wrecker and Tech. You adding in just a little bit of extra sauce where they're having some kind of thing that they're figuring out, and by the end of what happens, and Omega convinced Benni and the others to rise up. You know, it's like, I mean, bad pitch, but like that they're like, let's just get in and get out. And Omega's like, well, I'm going to talk to this Benni guy, and they're like, you can't change anything. Like, we just got to do our job. You can't change the world, Omega. And then she does change the world. And then Wrecker's like, oh, look at that. I guess Omega did change the world. And Hunter's like, yeah, I guess she did. Like anything that would have given us a little bit of like, okay, the clones are changing too. And this, so that you can really, if you go through Bad Batch, now that I'm thinking about it, if you go through the season, if there's an episode where any one of Clone Force 99 changes their opinion in the slightest, or changes their opinion in the slightest, or opens up a little bit more like Tech did, I'm like, that's a successful episode.
Yeah.
When we talk about, oh, it's just another mission of the week, more often than not, that is Clone Force 99 coming in, there's a problem, they solve it, but they don't really change. And we like to see characters change and grow. And I think that's where my struggle is a little bit. Because you're right, like when watching them do their thing, given the quality of the animation, given the amazing voice work by D. Bradley Baker, given the really great writing and coming up with these awesome set pieces, like they're awesome. Like they're amazing at what they do.
Yeah.
But it's just seeing that little bit more that I think gets us really invested in these characters.
Yep. Sorry. It's starting to hail out here, so I apologize if you guys can hear that as we're recording this. Yeah.
Y'all, it's the apocalypse. Y'all get ready. Pour some wine. This is the end times. It's here.
Yeah, it's crazy right now in Southern California. Laura, what did you think? Yeah, I think Michael makes excellent points here, Laura. This idea that we're 10 episodes into season 2, and yet we're not seeing these developing ideologies or philosophies. We're not seeing Hunter kind of break out step by step, or Wrecker start to push a little bit further about how they need to go fight the Empire. We're not seeing any that them necessarily changing with all these adventures, and how Omega is becoming more and more of a vocal part of their crew. We're not seeing them changing, but we do get to see them pull off a badass mission. So what do you think about their actions here in this episode and the way it was all done? But also Michael's point about the fact that we're not seeing them evolve quite enough yet, considering all that's happened.
You know, I think Michael you definitely make a great point. I mean, I think that's totally valid, and I definitely agree that it would be, I think if they had taken the time to sort of add a little bit of that extra sauce, they had the runtime, it would have been nice to have a little bit of that. I have a feeling maybe they're kind of circling back to the idea like Omega really is the heart of this show, and we get some great Omega moments in this. I mean, there is a moment where she is talking with Benni, and he's telling her about how the Ipsium's degraded and Mokko had to lower wages, but at least there's still work. And her facial expression is just this great, it's this perfect combination of doubt and pity that she looks at. And I love that the facial expressions that they are able to give these animated characters in this episode in particular are great, because we have it with Benni later. Something sort of similar that happens with him, and it's just perfect. And the fact that this episode really just kind of focused on them, I think it was just meant to be sort of, we had Echo's storyline of him sort of coming to terms with what the Batch was doing and not doing and going off on his own adventure. We had Tech's arc in the last episode where he had to sort of come to terms with, or not really come to terms, but at least be able to voice them out loud to Omega in a way that she understood. So I think maybe we're just taking a break and we're spending some time with Omega and somebody her own age. We don't get a ton of interaction of Omega with other kids her age. So I think this is maybe just a departure from I guess, you know, her just interacting with adults only, which I enjoyed. But I agree. I that doesn't mean that I disagree. I think that it would have been nice to sort of have a little bit maybe more of Wrecker besides him just bringing humor to this episode, which he did a great job of. I really did appreciate, if we're going to be stuck in like a capitalistic hellscape, I'm going to need some humor to wash all that down, in life in general and in this show. So I very much appreciated what he was doing in this, even if it wasn't particularly deep.
Yeah. I do think also, I mean, and I think maybe they didn't even make enough of it because it was pretty great, was when Mokko was like, you're not going to shoot us. If these shots go wild, you'll blow us all up. And when Wrecker was like, we don't miss, I was like, that's a great line. That's a great line.
Perfect.
And then they didn't miss when they shot.
And then they didn't miss.
Yeah, exactly.
They lived up to it.
I always thought Wrecker was going to be, told you. All right, well, Laura, I'll swing back to you again because you brought this up, and this should be maybe the final thing we talk about here, unless you guys want to bring up anything else. Omega's journey in this episode, right? We see her fresh off of what happened with her and Tech, of course. Her saying, we'll figure it out. Well, the three of them are, Wrecker's being grumpy right at the beginning because he's eating all his rations, and they're trying to put this hunk of junk together, this speeder, and find some way to make it work. But it's Omega who takes the initiative and figures out that she can connect with Gonki. It's Omega who, in essence, kind of goes on this journey. But she's also betrayed by Benni in the control room. She also has these questions about why he'd be in a situation like this. Remember, she's still discovering the world outside of Camino. So, connecting with someone that's her age, sure, that's interesting. But also having that person betray her, she doesn't get mad. She doesn't storm off. She doesn't yell at him. She accepts being taken prisoner, in essence, by Mokko and led out the door. And even when Benni apologizes, she doesn't retort with something like, you should feel sorry or something. She doesn't say anything. She just kind of accepts the situation and feels sympathy for him, and even gives him her rations before she's even arrested. So all these moments she's having in discovering Benni's journey, is this giving her more of a foundation for when she does become a rebel to have more empathy, more understanding, more consideration? Do we see that developing as she's seeing more and more of the world?
I definitely think that's the case. And I think that one of the things that I haven't really given a lot of thought to up until this episode is how privileged Omega has sort of been. She grew up on Camino. She was well fed. She was well taken care of. And now she's among this group of adults who have, she's got a whole group of people that are just looking out almost exclusively for her. Like, she's their number one priority. And the fact that she's now submerged in this environment with this kid and this group of kids who are existing in this world, and she tells him, you shouldn't have to compete for food.
Right.
Like, yeah, that's from a certain point of view, that is a little bit privileged. From another point of view, she's right. Yeah. That's a basic thing. We shouldn't have to be competing for food and shelter and things like that in our real world. And yet, there are lots of people, unfortunately, who do for those basic necessities. So he tells her, that's just the way things work around here. And this is all sort of news to her. We're exposing Omega to a bunch of new things, unfortunately, and negative ideas that she probably hasn't really given much thought to before. And I do like that you brought that up about how Benni at one point does apologize for stealing the ship, and she gives him her rations. And he looks at her and asks, why would you give this to me? I mean, that is precious in his mind. And she's like, it's just a thank you. You helped us, so I appreciate it. You can have my rations. And he looks at her with such suspicion, and it kind of takes him a second, but eventually he does say thank you. And it's a really sad moment. And I think the fact that we're sort of getting her immersed in some of these new environments with other people, especially people her age that are living in this sort of squalor and this negative environment, it's growth for Omega that I think is helpful and is going to be good, I think, for her as she grows.
It's an excellent point. From her point of view, food and having people protect, that's just a natural way of existence. But her seeing how some other people of her age exist in the world and the things they have to go through, it's so foreign to her. But her impulse is to help. Her impulse is to care, given the rations, not getting mad at him. She even handles her own with that droid when she lets go, when she takes the droid with her overboard, knowing that Hunter's going to grab her because she knows she's taken care of. She trusts that she's got people in the world. I don't think Benni would have trusted Drake or anybody to save him from falling into a vat of Ipsium lava, in essence, or Ipsum lava, in essence. So, Mike, what do you think about how...
Is that the scientific term?
I have no clue.
I think so. I think that's it.
What do you think, Mike, about how Omega's journey is played out in this episode here? Aside from what we've already kind of touched on earlier in the episode or in this show, what do you think about how they handled her step-by-step progression here as she confronts Benni's existence?
It's tough because I like Omega. I don't love Omega. Ooh. And I think I don't think she's a bad character by any stretch. I think she's really good. But again, comparing it to some of the other Star Wars shows that we've had, and whether you want to compare her to Sabine, whether you want to compare her to Ahsoka, like whoever you want to compare her to, I think that what they're choosing to do is challenging in a way. And I think Laura hits on a lot of things that I wish they leaned into more. Okay. When you have a character like Ahsoka Tano who just I want to be a badass Jedi and I'm going to try really hard to be a badass Jedi. It's easy to get that. She's going to be active. She's going to jump in. She's not going to listen to Anakin. She's going to go do her own thing. Right. Sometimes she's going to prove to everybody she's awesome. Sometimes she's going to fail. When you have a character who is inherently sweet and empathetic, that's harder to make her active. And people just, unfortunately in our society, feel like empathy and forgiveness and niceness are weaknesses instead of strengths. Like, think about that amazing speech that Ki Kwan gives in Everything Everywhere All at Once to Michelle Yeoh when he kind of says, "This is the way that I fight. Like, being nice is the way that I fight." And I kind of, to Laura's point, I wish that Omega actually got questioned more, whether that was by Clone Force 99, by Sid, by Benni, by people I think that a season and a half into a show, I'm ready for our lead to stop being like, I don't know, guys, I just want to be part of the team. This is great. And I want her to step into her own and be like, look, Tech, you fight your way. Wrecker, you fight your way. Hunter, you fight your way. This is how I fight. I'm nice and I care about people. And that's a strength all its own. I want her to say that shit. I want her to step up and own who she is a little bit more. And maybe that's where we're going with her. But with all things Bad Batch, I feel like they've chosen to go there at a stroll. and it's a stroll through a lovely, beautiful part of the galaxy. And it all looks amazing. And I like all of it. But I could walk a little faster.
But I also wonder, look, it's a Disney show. I wonder if they worry that they don't want to have the young girl be showing up the elders, the young girl be mouthing back or snapping back at the older people. I'm throwing it out there as a possibility.
I don't know if you watch what's on TV, but every kid on every kid's show steps up to their elders. Part of the nature of a kid show is that the kid is the one who's the focal point and is usually right. Usually in a Disney show, it's the adults who are kind of bumbling and goofy. And in Star Wars, it's not that, which is good. Yeah. But I think that look, when Clone Wars first came out, everyone in the world hated Ahsoka Tano and said, why did you give us this shitty character?
Yeah.
And it took them a little bit to find their groove with her. But once they found her groove with her, she really took off. And it was around end of season 1, beginning of season 2, I think, when Ahsoka really kind of came into her own. And I think everything about Omega is great. But I think, and I don't think I'm alone in this, I think a lot of people who genuinely enjoy Bad Batch are ready for her to step up a little bit more.
Yeah, I don't disagree. All right, any final words, Laura, on this episode? Anything we missed or that you'd like to bring up that we didn't talk about?
The end of the last episode, I predicted that a sort of storm was on the horizon. That's what we saw, literally in the imagery, and that not so much in this episode. So maybe that's what's still to come.
I do wonder. At the end of last episode, I was like, well, it's called The Crossing. I feel like maybe they're going to have to cross something through the storm and survive it. And I was like, nope.
No.
We're going to do Oliver in space. Cool.
Retrieval. Cool. Michael, any final words or are you good?
No, it's just what I said. I don't want people to think I don't I love all things Star Wars. I am a straight up Star Wars nerd. If you give me Star Wars stuff, I will take in all of it. And I genuinely love these characters, and I love this era of Star Wars, and I love this part of the universe, and I love expanding the story of the clones. So I'm enjoying everything. I just start to get to a certain point where I'm like, why am I not obsessing over this the way I obsess over other parts of Star Wars?
Fair point. Fair point. Yeah, this is one of those episodes that I enjoyed the symbolism and the commentary, the social commentary. And listen, Star Wars does make social commentary. I appreciated what they were saying about a system like this because it isn't just about an economic system. This could be an ideology, a belief, a religion, a church, an organization, a company that functions like this. And people need to snap out of this idea. And certainly we saw that after COVID, how some people didn't want to go work these jobs anymore for the minimum wage that they were getting because they realized there are other jobs that'll pay them better, or there are organizations or other lives that they can live where they're not subject to someone just doling out pennies, barely giving them any raises. They went to go find other things. And so I like that that was bubbling into the surface here throughout this episode. I appreciate the episode for that. Other than that, it was kind of a little bit forgettable for me, but I liked the way they approached that. And maybe we're moving Omega a little bit closer to a confrontation, as Michael and Laura pointed out, with the other Bad Batch, members of the Bad Batch, to see if she can talk them finally into getting involved in this fight. And we'll see. We got to get Sid. We have to have some confrontation with Sid. So hopefully that's where we're heading next, now that they fixed the Marauder and they're taking off back to hang out with Sid, who supposedly was sending something to go and save them. Now, apparently, they don't need to get saved and got off on their own. So we'll see what happens with that in the next episode. All right, thanks, everybody, for watching this episode of The Bad Batch. We appreciate it madly. Michael, what do we have to tell them?
If you want to follow us, you can follow us on Twitter at geek_buddies, on Instagram at @the_geek_buddies. You can follow John Rocha at The Rocha Says. You can follow me at MKToon. You can follow our absent friend Shannon McClung at Shannon_McClung, or at Shannon the Geek Buddy on Instagram. And if you like watching Mokko eat food, like I know you do, and you want to keep talking about how good he looks chomping down on that Rancor leg or whatever it was, here's what you can do to keep having amazing Star Wars conversations with us. You can smash that like button below. You can subscribe to Johnny's Outlaw Nation page. Check out all the amazing content he's got there. Leave your comments below. Let us know, like, are you like all in on the Bad Batch? Are you liking it and wishing it was more? Are you feeling like this is not your Star Wars? Let us know what you think in the comments below. If you're listening to us on a podcast, go ahead and leave us some stars and some comments. Helps us go up in the rankings. And as always, the best thing that you can do is retweet this video, post it on your socials, send it to your friends, and tell them to hang out with your buddies, the Geek Buddies.
And shout out to our friend Shannon McClung, who gave me this Aldani Festival shirt as a late Christmas present. So thank you very much, Shannon. I'm wearing it in honor of you not being here. And of course, big love to Laura Kelly, who joined us here. And thank you so much, Laura. We appreciate it. We always love having you on the show. Please let people know where they can find you and everything you got going on yourself.
Sure, come find me on Twitter and Instagram at @shutup_Laura, and you can follow the show that I host with my friend Alice, Force Toast to Star Wars Happy Hour, on Twitter and Instagram at Force Toast Pod. And also, I host the Jedi Way right here with John on his channel. I was just looking back through some of our old episodes of the day, and I totally forgot about this one. We did an episode that was the essential Anakin and Ahsoka episodes of the Clone Wars. I'm still so proud of that episode, and it's going to come up in conversation here eventually as we start getting more and more Ahsoka-related announcements about her live-action series. So I think that episode is essential viewing.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. Thank you so much, Laura. Appreciate you promoting that for sure. Is that everything? Yeah, that's everything. All right. You all go enjoy yourselves. Have a great weekend. Be safe out there, no matter what's going on, weather-related in your area. And we'll talk to you next time with another brand new spoiler review episode of The Bad Batch from the
Geek
Buddies!
Hey!